Today's daf is daf Dalid. The kama shir stira. What is the minimum amount of time that a woman would have to be alone, secluded with that man towards which her husband gave her kinui, in order for that to be considered stira? And the Brisa answers Kidei Tuma. There's a certain shear, a minimum amount of time that she has to be royal Tuma. So the Brisa says, what is that shear of Tuma? Kidei Bia. The amount of time it would take for the Bia to take place. And the Brisa says, what is Bia? There are many parts to Bia. There's Tchilas Bia, there's Sof Bia. Kidei Hara. Hara is the beginning of Bia. And that's called Nishikas Ha'ever Be'oso Mokum. How long does it take to accomplish Hara? So the Brisa quotes Rabbi Shmuel as the first of many, many opinions. Kidei HaKofas Deka. The time it takes to walk around an eitz deka, a date palm. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. The Gemara is going to explain later on Daf Daled Amud Beis that each one of the Tanoim in the Brisa that we're learning now has come up with his own shir. And all of these shiurim are coming to explain the zman, the time period that it takes for hara. Now, are we talking about an average person? It doesn't seem so, because why would the Tanoim have to answer that question? I mean, that's something that we should know. And he quotes here in the footnote a sefer called the Orach Chama. And he says that each one of the Tanoim knew that the other Tana was going to come up with a slightly different shir, because each one can perform in a different speed, so to speak, with one with Zrizus, one with Atzlus. Now, in the case of a Noef, then we assume that he's going to do it as fast as he possibly can, because he doesn't want to get caught. And therefore, in comparison to other people who are not in such a rush, he's in a big rush. So what we're looking for here, says the Orach Chama, is the shir hamohir biyoseh. It's the quickest amount of time that a person could accomplish this when he's afraid for his own life, so to speak. And let's go through the various shitos. So the first sheet is Rabbi Shmuel. And he says, Kidei HaKofas Deka. Second sheet is Rabbi Eliezer. Kidei Mezigas Kos. Right? They used to have concentrated wine, and they would dilute the wine with water. Let's say it was a ratio of 3-1. And as long as it takes to be mosaic, because to dilute the kos, that's the shear of Kidei Hara. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Kidei L'shtosa. And we're going to see later on, the Gemara is going to vacillate as to whether or not he's extending the time of Rabbi Eliezer, or he's disagreeing with Rabbi Eliezer in Gansen, and instead of Mezigas HaKos, the shear is Kidei Lishtos. Ben Azai Omer, very interesting, because Ben Azai was never married. The Gemara is going to point this out later. How would he know anything about Hara? But anyway, Kidei Litzos Beitza. The amount of time it would take to crack an egg on a hot frying pan until it fries. He says here it's an Eish Beinonis, it's an average fire, and that's what we're talking about. Rabbi Yehuda, and now we get to Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva Omer, What's the shear of hara? Is kedei legoma. How long does it take to swallow the fried egg? Now, it seems that legoma, the word legoma, as Rashi interprets it elsewhere, not here, is bivas achas. In other words, he mamish swallows the egg. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer kedei legmoa sholosh beitzim zu achar zu. Right, the amount of time that it would take to swallow 3 eggs, one after the other. Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmi Omer kedei likshar gardi nema. Like, let's say, for example, the weaver finds that one of the chutim is ripped, and he has to tie it because otherwise it's going to fall by the wayside. How long does it take to tie it? Now, gardi is a word that describes a weaver who's zariz b'malachta. He's very much an expert. Chanin ben Pinchas Omer, what's the shiv hara? Kedei shetoshit yada l'toch pia litol kesam. She has a piece of something or other caught between her teeth. She has to take a toothpick and remove it. How long does it take her to put the toothpick in her mouth and remove that particle that's between her teeth? Plema Omer, what's the shiv hara? Kedei shetoshit yada l'sal litol kikar. Okay, the Gemara is going to have a lot of different possibilities as to exactly what the situation of Plemo is describing, but just in general, a kind of simple translation is that she has a basket of bread, and how long does it take her to put her arm into the basket and choose one of the loaves of bread? But Zeichel Davar, this shear of Kedei Netilas Kikar Misal, although we don't have a full-fledged proof, but we do have a Zeichel Davar. Pasuk in Mishlei says, Kiva ad Isha Zonad Kikar Lochem. And the Gemara is going to make a big deal about this a little bit later on in the Agadita about Netilas Yadayim for a Kikar Lechem. But in any event, we're talking about an Isha Zona, and there's an analogy to a Kikar Lechem, and this is an allusion to the fact that the time it takes for stira, for the Maises Nus, is the time that it takes to take out the Kikar of Lechem. So the Gemara raises the following question. V'chol hani lomali, why do we have all these different shiurim? The Tana should have just written that the shear of stira is kedei tuma. And the Gemara assumes that the first Tana here on the list, which is Rabbi Shmuel, who establishes hakofas dekel, that should be the only shear that would be quoted. And the Gemara says, tzrichi, we need all these different shiurim to eat Tana. If we would have just said that the shear of steers kedei tuma is hama min, I would have thought that the shear of tuma includes what's called ritzui. Kedei tumasa ve'artsusa. It's not enough that he just does the ma'aseh bia, but rather he has to spend some time to appease her, to seduce her, to speak to her heart, try to get her to agree to participate in this avera. Is Kamash Malon. That's what the Tana wants to teach us when it says at the beginning of this brisa that the shear of steers kedei tuma, which is kedei bia, and that is the zman habia levado without the ritzu. The Tana kedei bia, but if the Tana would have omitted the shear of kedei tuma and it just would have said kedei bia, hava mina kedei gmar bia. So why did the Tana have to start with Kedei Tuma, which is hara and Kedei Bia Kedei hara. And the answer is Kamashmal and Kedei hara. All you need is Neshikas Eva. You don't need Kumar Bia. The Iashmeina and Kedei hara. And if it wouldn't have added Kedei Tuma, but it just would have said Kedei hara, Hava Mina would have said the shears Kedei hara Vartsusa. Maybe you need Ritzui as well. So it's not just the shear of hara, but also the time it takes to be Maratza Isha to get her to agree to this Avera. Kamashval and Tana says Kedei Tuma. And what is Kedei Tuma? Kedei Bia. And Kedei Bia means Kama Kedei hara, Kedei Akofas Dekel, and it means the time of hara Bilvad without Ritzui. Now, the Gemara is going to bring a second brisa that has many, many contradictions to the first brisa in terms of who holds what. Uriminu, in the pasuk it says, "V'nelam me'enei isha v'nistera v'hi nitma v'kamashira stira lo shamana." The pasuk doesn't indicate how long is the shear of stira, but kshu omer v'hi nitma. Heavy Omer Kedei Tuma, which is Kedei Bia, Kedei hara. So it means Kedei Tuma without Ritzui. Kedei Bia means not Gemar Bia, but rather Bia. And what is Bia? And Halacha Bia is Kedei hara, which we said was Neshikas Eva. And how much of a shear is Kedei hara? Kedei Chazoras Dekel. Now let's just see, in the first brisa, it said Kedei HaKofas Dekel. In the second brisa, it says Kedei Chazoras Dekel, Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Now let's make a note of the fact that Rabbi Eliezer, in the first brisa, said the shear of hara was Kedei Mezigas Kos. And here he's quoted in the second brisa as saying that the shear hara is Kedei Chazoras Dekel. That's going to be question number one. Well, actually, question number two, because the first question is what's going on over here? Is it Hakofas Dekel or is it Chazoras Dekel? And question number two is Rabbi Eliezer was talking about Kedei Mezigas Kos. Now he's talking about Kedei Chazoras Dekel. But the plot grows thicker because Rabbi Shua Omer Kedei Mezigas HaKos, which was Rabbi Eliezer's opinion in the previous price, and Rabbi Shua rejected it. Ben Azai Omer Kedei Lishtosa. Now, Ben Azai in the first brisa was talking about Kedei Litzlos Beitza. Again, the Gemara, I'm just giving a preview of all the different kashas the Gemara is going to raise over here. This second brisa doesn't seem to be at all in line, in sync with the first brisa. And then we have Rabbi Akiva Omer Kedei Litzlos Beitza, which was Ben Azai's opinion in the first, and Rabbi Akiva add Legoma. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer Kedei Legoma. Okay, fine. We didn't have Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira in the first brisa, as far as we did. Kedei Legmoa Sholosh Beitzit. And here it's Kedei Legmoa Beitzit Sluya. We're not talking about Sholosh Beitzit. In any event, the Gemara now begins to go into all the kashas and all the steers. It appears in our mind that Hainu Akofas Dekel, Hainu Chazoras Dekel, that both of these are the same. There's Hakofas Dekel to go around the tree, and there's Chazoras Dekel. And we'll see soon what Chazoras Dekel is, but the Gemara thinks that it's referring to the person. Chazora is the person. Chazora means to go around the Dekel. So we see that Chazoras Dekel at this point is the same, it's identical as Hakofas Dekel, which is good news, because then we can reconcile the previous brisa that uses Kedei Hakofas Dekel as the shear of hara, together with this brisa that has Chazoras Dekel. The only thing is that the original Hakofas Dekel was attributed to Rabbi Shmuel, and Chazoras Dekel here in the second brisa is attributed to Rabbi Eliezer. So therefore, the Gemara asks, Chasam on Rabbi Shmuel, Kedei HaKofes Dekel. Upolig Rabbi Lezer Oleh. Rabbi Lezer was the one who said Kedei Mizigas Kos, obviously rejecting HaKofes Dekel. And Hoch in this second brayso, Rabbi Lezer Kedei Chazor's Dekel. So basically, we have a stira in Rabbi Eliezer between the first brayso of Kedei Mizigas Kos and the second brayso of Kedei Chazor's Dekel. And not only that, but if you identify Chazor's Dekel and HaKofes Dekel as being identical, then how could it be that in the first brayso HaKofes Dekel is attributed to Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Eliezer disagreed with him, and here Kedei Chazor's Dekel is attributed to Rabbi Eliezer? Omer Abaye. Abaye now establishes that HaKofes Dekel and Chazor's Dekel are two different time periods. Hakofa beregel. Hakofa means the man. The man is going around. Chazara is not the man that's going around, but rather ruach. In other words, the wind is blowing the branches of the dekel tree, and it's only after the wind stops that the branch lands back where it was from the beginning. So imagine you looking at a tree and you're seeing the branches of the tree shaking in the wind. How long will it take until the wind passes by and no longer impacts on the branch? So the branch just reverts back to its place. And I'm going to have to assume that we're talking about a ruach mitsuya, just a regular average velocity wind. Boy, Rav Ashi, now we begin what I call the sugi of teku. One suffix after the other, each one ends in teku. Boy, Rav Ashi, chazara beruach, when we say that the shir, according to Rabbi Eliezer, is chazara beruach, kihechi di'ozil v'hodar asi, o dilma, kihechi di'ozil v'asi v'hodar koi b'duchte. Are we talking about a shear in which the anaf is, this branch is waving and it's no longer stationary in its place and we have to wait till it goes back to its place? Or perhaps it's the time period that it takes after it blows and moves, and then it's going to stop totally, legamre. So it's not just that, on a temporary basis, it got back to where it is. We have to wait until finally there's no longer wind, and therefore, till what we call legamre here, it's going to take a longer period of time. He writes here, it's a shir rav yoser. It's a longer period of time. Me'asher yashalim komo. Why? Because even though it's Yashav L'Mkomo, which was the first possibility, V'hodar Asi, but nevertheless, Mamshich L'Snonea, there's wind, and it continues to shake in the wind. So we have to wait until Asi V'hodar and Koi B'duchte, until it's back into its original place on a more permanent basis, we call Legamre. Take it. The Gemara asks another stira, Hasam. The first brayso Omer Rabbi Eliezer, what's the shir of Tumah Kedei Mizigas Kos? Hacha Kedei Chazor's Dekel. And the Gemara answers, Idi v'idi chad shiruhu. Now this answer of the Gemara, Idi v'idi chad shiruhu, is going to be the first choice of the Gemara, time after time, of the stiros that are going to be raised. But in some cases, and the Gemara is going to try to analyze why we cannot apply the principle of Idi v'idi chad shiuruhu. But right now, we're identifying Mizigas HaKos and Chazoras HaDekel as being identical. We're asked another steer. Hasam in the first price on Rabbi Shua, Kedei Lishtosa. Notice the yayin was already diluted and he's going to drink the wine. I assume a revius of yayin. Hacha in the second price, Omar. Rabbi Yeshua has a different opinion. Kedei Mizigas HaKos. We're back to diluting by adding water to the concentrated wine. And for some reason, which the Gemara is going to explain in just a second, we cannot apply the principle here of idi ve'idi chad shiur, but rather ema kidei limzog v'lishtos. That when Rabbi Yeshua says kidei mezigas hakos in this second brisa, what he means is to be mosing the kos and drink the kos. Why? Because when a person dilutes the wine, he doesn't do it in advance, because then the wine is not as tasty and it loses something with the passage of time. So he drinks it immediately after he completes the dilution process. And therefore we can reconcile Rabbi Yoshua in the first brisa of Kedei Lishtoso with Rabbi Yoshua in the second brisa of Kedei Meziga, because we're talking about Meziga that follows immediately with Shtia, and that's the shear of Tumah according to Rabbi Yoshua in both brises. So Gemara asks, Lema Idi ve'idi chad shiuruhu. Why not say the old answer that we're going to use over and over again, that Mezigas Hakos is the exact amount of time of Shtiyas Hakos? And the Gemara says that's an untenable position. Why? Im Kain, Hainu Rabbi Eliezer. In the first price, Rabbi Eliezer gave the shear of Kedei Mezigas Kos. And then we have the second brisa where Rabbi Yeshua repeats Kedei Mezigas Kos. But in the first brisa, Rabbi Yeshua disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer, and he says Kedei Mezigas, Kedei Shtiyas Hakos. So it seems that Shtiyas Hakos does not equal Mezigas Hakos, but rather we're going to combine the two, and it's one long shear of Meziga plus Shtiya. Vaita, another stira. Hasam Rabbi Ben Azai in the first brisa, Kedei Litzos Beitza, Hacha, Amar Kedei Lishtoso, to drink Yain Moz. And the Gemara says, Idi ve'idi chad shiuru. That's the same identical shear. Gemara asks another stira. Hasam Rabbi Akiva Kedei Legoma. In the first brisa, Rabbi Akiva says that the time it takes to swallow and gulp down a roasted egg, a fried egg. And Hachi in the second brisa, Amar Kedei Litzlos Beitza. We're talking about the time period it takes to fry the egg. And where it answers Ema, we're going to have to say that what Rabbi Akiva meant in the second brisa, the Shir Tumah of Hara, is Kedei Litzlos Beitza Legoma. We're going to do exactly what we did before in Rabbi Yeshua. And we're going to combine the two Shiurim. And in the first brisa, Kedei Legoma, but that's after Litzlosa. So that's what this second brisa is telling us, that you need Kedei Litzlos, Tzliya, and you need Legoma. Why not apply our principle and say that Tzliya and Gemiya are the same identical shear? And the Gemara says that's untenable. Why? In Cain, Hainu Ben Azai. Ben Azai was the one who said Kedei Lishtosa. So you can tell me Rabbi Akiva is also saying Kedei Lishtosa, but he's just saying Kedei Litzlos. But it's all the same shear, then he's not disagreeing with Ben Azai. And we couldn't say that the shear of Tzlias Beitza and the shear of Kniya is the same, if it's the same identical shear. And the first brisa just gives one example, the second another example, whether it's Tzliya or whether it's Kniya, then we should come to the conclusion that the shear of Tzliya and the shear of Kniya are equal. And then we have a problem because of Ben Azai. Because Ben Azai in the second brisa is quoted as saying, Kedei Litzlos Beitza, and Rabbi Akiva disagrees with him. Another stira. Hasam Am Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. The shear of Tumas Kedei Ligmar Shlosha Beitzim Zu Acher Zu. Hacha, the second brisa Amar. They quote Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira saying Kedei Ligoma. And the Gemara answers, Lidvarav to Rabbi Akiva Kamar. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira in the first brisa is telling you what Rabbi Akiva would say and why I would disagree with Rabbi Akiva. Takama, Rabbi Akiva says, Mishayim b'tzliya gemiya, and on that, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira jumps up and he disagrees, and he says that b'makom litlos shtei pulos tzli gemiya, instead of having two different actions, one is tzliya, one is gebia, as Rabbi Akiva has, ema, we should say that the shear is gebia lechudei. Only the amount of time it takes to swallow the egg, not to the time. Don't add and expand the time period to frying it. The first brisa says, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yirmiyah Omer Kadesh Yikshar Garde Nema. Right, we're talking about a weaver, a professional, and he ties a chut that gets ripped. Boy, Rav Ashi, a long list of sveikos of Rav Ashi on each part of the brisa. Now we're focusing on the first brisa. Is Dimarachek or Dimakarev? Where is the end of that chut that ripped? Is it near the next chut? And therefore, it doesn't take a long time to put the two chutim together and tie them together. The Makarev, I'm sorry, it'll take a little more time because it's Rechog, or the Makarev, the two chutim are near each other taken. Chanin ben Pinchas Omer, we have in Brisa number 1 that quotes the sheet of Chanin, Kadesh Toshit Yodel Tov Pioli Tol Kesa, Boy Rav Ashi, a whole list of sveikas. He says the Mahadek or the Lo Mahadek. When you say you need the shear of taking out a particle that's caught between your teeth, is there a word for that in English? In the body, it's called a splinter, but I don't know what it's called in the mouth. All right. Anyway, the Mahadek, are we talking about a case where it's really stuck between the two teeth, and therefore it's going to take quite a while to loosen it up and get it out? Oh, the Lo Mahadek. Or maybe it's just, got loosely hanging there between the teeth. It's very easy to take out. Take it. Play Omer Kadesh Toshid Yodavi Sal Sal Little Kikar. Boy Rav Ashi, the Mahadek or the Lo Mahadek? What is this bread? Is it tightly fit in the basket, and yet you have to really, with great effort, pull it out? Well, Lo Mahadek, it's just floating on the surface of the sal of the basket. You have a loaf of bread, and you just take out the bread. Furthermore, a whole list of sveikas here about plemo and kadesh toshid yodol l'sal litol is b'chadeto b'yatito. Are we talking about a brand new sal? And therefore, what happens is until you work in the sal, then there are different little pieces from the weaving that stick out. It's a little bit more difficult to remove the kikar. Obeatiko, we're talking about a sal yoshon, and basically with use, you sort of all those rough edges and pieces that come out, that stick out, become smooth, and it's very easy to take out the kikar. V'chamima o bekrira. Are we talking about a hot piece of bread, a loaf of bread that's right out of the oven, and you have a hot piece of bread? It's still very very soft and mushy, and therefore you have to be very careful when you take it out. O bekrira, or with a loaf of bread that's long ago cooled off, and it's not going to get messed up in his hands, and he can take it out very easily. Shorter period of time.